Okay, today I'd like to talk to you about the Sabbath. This is a very important issue to me, a very important topic for all of us to really understand and grasp what this meaning of Sabbath really means. Christians today will tell you that the Sabbath is Sunday, that's the Lord's Day. In Judaism, the synagogue would be filled on the Sabbath, which is Saturday for them. And in Islam, this would begin on Friday for them as their Sabbath. And these are believed to be dedicated days of worship for the different religions, and where they believe they should rest from their works and just focus on God for that period of time. However, there's more meaning to the Sabbath, and if we look at the origin of the Sabbath, we have in the creation story of Genesis a description of 6 days of creation that's taking place. In that sixth day man is created, and the seventh day the Sabbath commences. So if we look at that sixth day, instead of terms of day and night, but rather the first time man comes to existence on the sixth day, and of course at the end of that day he rests, he enters into what we call the Sabbath, or a sleep. And the sleep state really is the Sabbath state. The days are irrelevant. The important factor that we're looking at is this small increment of time, the time that man comes into existence and then enters into his rest, followed by the statement that the Sabbath is God resting from his works, which is exactly what this whole process of creation started with, was a rest or a sleep or entering a dreamlike state. And as God entered that dreamlike state, he imagined being the fish or the birds or the animals. And he imagined them so real that he felt that. He felt the feeling of flight and being flown, and the fish swimming, and everything that's created in those first 5 days. That's God moving through the creation, bringing that into existence by literally becoming that part of the creation, becoming the fish, the birds, the animals. And then of course he becomes man. And then that is the creation's completion, really, because that's the highest point of, really the lowest point that he can contract himself within on himself, and the pinnacle of our glory. So within being a man or woman, this process called sealing of God's people takes place. And it has directly to do with the Sabbath. The Sabbath is directly associated with the sealing of God's people. And what does that really mean, to seal God's people in this belief? And really it is a belief that we're taking part in that shows our belief in this process. So if we go to Hebrews 4:9-16, we can read, "There remaineth therefore a rest to the people of God." And this is Hebrews. This is the New Testament. This is an Old Testament law that we have to, keep the Sabbath on the seventh day like we see with Judaism. Let's read through this. "For he that is entered into his rest, he also hath ceased from his own works, as God did from his." And this is important, because ceasing from your works, you can only do when you're asleep. Sitting around a house, not doing any work or labor, or having anybody in your household do any work or labor, and just sitting around focusing on the Word of God or the religious ceremony, whatever it be, is not entering into a rest. You're laboring in that process still to learn, to read, to do different things. You're still going to prepare food for yourself. You're still going to reheat stuff and warm stuff and use power and do different things. So therefore, you're not entering into any rest. And the true meaning of entering into his rest is that sleep. For when we enter sleep, we're entering into that spirit world. We're entering into his world. So God laid down in man, and he sleeps in man. And that's the meaning of the Sabbath. Man has God sleeping in him still. And it is our process to wake him from inside of us. So this waking process has to do, I believe, with the Sabbath. And I'm going to go back to a little story that I have from my childhood. And I was around, I would say, 10 years old. And the time was the 80s, and there was Freddy Krueger. Nightmare on Elm Street was a very popular movie. I had 5 older siblings and 1 younger sibling, but my older brothers would work third shift, and they would, on their nights off, watch movies on HBO, and of course, Nightmare on Elm Street comes on, and I wander out of my bedroom, the sound of the TV playing at 2 in the morning, and just kind of sit beside the couch. My brothers weren't even aware that I was up watching the movie with them, and I was terrified by that movie. And I remember my mother getting up and noticing me watching this movie and yelling at my older brothers for allowing me to watch this movie, and they had no idea that I was even sitting there watching it with them. They were so spaced out on the movie. So I proceed to return to bed, and I fall asleep, and of course I have nightmares about Freddy Krueger. And this happens night after night, and I feel so terrified by the dreams. I'm not falling asleep, because as soon as I fall asleep, then I'm being chased by Freddy, and I really want to get control of this. I want to get control of my fear and stop the nightmares. So I decide to try some different things before I fall asleep, and I think intently on what am I thinking about before I fall asleep? Is this why I'm dreaming about what I'm thinking about? So no one really taught me this process. This was just something that I practiced with and worked at a young age. Later I called it the dream architect. And this is how I found a way that I could build my dreams into a lucid experience that I could participate in and have full control over. And we'll get to that in more detail here in just a little bit. So as I process my thoughts before I go to sleep, I decide to try some different techniques. And the first one, because I've come to the conclusion in my mind that I was thinking too much upon the Nightmare on Elm Street movie, and then I would try to forget about it because I didn't want to dream about it, and then sure enough I would dream about it. So I said to myself, well, maybe that's the problem. Maybe I need to, if that's how it works, let me test this. Let me try to think about something else intently before I fall asleep, and then I'll try to forget about it and clear my mind, and then just ease off into sleep like I normally would. So this process yielded immediate results. That night I did not dream about Freddy. Instead, before I fell asleep, I thought intently about flying, like what it would feel like to be flying through the air in my dream. So if I'm going to dream about something, I might as well dream about something that's going to be fun, something that's going to be exciting. And sure enough, as soon as I entered that dream, in my dream state, I remember leaping off of the roof of the house where we were living at that time, taking kind of a running go at it, and then just leaping. And I was flying. At that moment, I was flying through the air, and the dream, even now, is so vivid. I can recall the smells and the visuals of following the sun around the earth as I flew all the way around the earth. and seeing different areas below me as if I was a plane in the sky flying. And it was a beautiful dream, and I really enjoyed that. And many times after that, I rebuilt that dream just so I can experience that feeling of flying again. So in this process, the 3 points to remember in the dream creation are to visualize intently, imagine what it is you want to do. Like, for example, I use the flying. And as I'm imagining that flying experience, I'm imagining the feelings in my belly as if I'm driving in a car with my parents and I go over a hill and you feel that wee feeling. That's kind of what I like to attach into that feeling. So the feeling's very important. The emotions, that's what drove the Freddy nightmares, was the scared emotion. And then when I started playing with the flight emotion of the feeling, what it would be like to fly, to try to paint that picture in my mind, to use as much details as possible, and then to forget all about it. So you go through a process of creating that imagination, feeling it out, feeling the emotions, feeling everything with it, and then forgetting about it. Going to a silence in your mind as if you're preparing to go to sleep. And then you enter that sleep, and lo and behold, some dream along that lines that you were intending is now fulfilled in you, in the dream itself, showing itself. So in this process, I feel that I kind of tripped on something, and it gave me more control. So when I did dream, I was more focused on what I was dreaming on, and a more lucid dreaming experience took place. So I would begin to document and write down a lot of these different dreams that were taking place that didn't make sense to me at the time. So later on, these dreams, they play out in different ways, as kind of forecasting things that were coming, precognition type things I didn't quite understand at the time. And I'll give one example here. There was a period that I dreamt very intensely that I was in a house, and it was my house that I grew up in, very familiar house, and the power had went out. And in the dream, I can't turn the power on with the light switch or anything, so I go outside. I'm standing on the front porch. There's an eerie feeling that there's no one around. There's no one here in the house, and there's no one wherever I look. I look down the neighborhood block. There's just nobody around. I feel like I'm all by myself, and then the dream ends. Now, this dream, 20 years ago, I had this dream. But just this last year, it came fulfilled, meaning that the dream came back to me. I had the dream again, and this time it made so much more sense. It's the exact same dream, but now I look at my parents' house, and it's been sold. It's gone. There's no one there family-wise when I go to that location. And it just feels very empty. There's other people living there now, but they've since moved down to Tennessee, to another area. And I feel that that's the fulfilling of that dream. Since it came back 20 years later, I had the dream again. And I remember having this dream several times. And it does feel a little bit like there's abandonment and different stuff associated with this feeling in time now where I'm at with my parents moving. But yeah, I'm perfectly fine with it. I think that dream helped me to be okay with it, knowing that that day would come, that I would be the last one in this area out of all my family members. They've all seemed to move out of state and into other parts of the country, so we're pretty broken up now. But that's just an example of one dream that comes in this process of practicing the lucid state, dreaming, you will remember more, so then you become more perceptive to the dreams that you have that you're not creating and what those dreams mean. So this is all part of the Sabbath. This entering this process, having the belief that you are capable of controlling your dreams and really your reality. Because in the dream world, you can change reality in there. You can recreate things. You can stop time. There's one incident that was pretty funny that happened not too long ago in a dream where I was driving in a car with my wife, and we are getting ready to go over the side of this cliff. There's a guardrail there. There's a very steep drop off, and there's water down below. And this bridge is taking us into a tunnel in the side of this mountain that we're getting ready to enter. And before we reach the tunnel, I snap, the guardrail snaps, I go over the edge, and I just kind of look over at my wife, and I just start laughing at her and saying, well, I guess this dream's over with. And as soon as I said that in the dream, everything stopped. We were suspended in midair in the vehicle, and we weren't crashing into the side of the mountain. Everything had just stopped, and the car is just floating there. And I look at her, and she's not animated either. She's completely still, and everything's still. And so I think to myself, well, maybe I'll just set us down over here on the side of the bank down below where I could see, looked like a safe place along the water. So I say, as I'm thinking this, I am now on that shore. I'm there with her. She's laying there. I'm kneeled down beside her, looking up at the car that's still suspended in midair. And I'm thinking to myself, how do I revive her? And it came to my mind that I would press the X button in my head, because I was playing some games with my kids. I played Fortnite, and we go to revive a person, we press the X button. And I just thought the whole thing was comical, because as soon as I thought that thought, she became reanimated. The car started moving, crashed into the side of the mountain. And I'm just sitting there laughing at her and saying, it's just a dream. It's just a dream. That was within the dream itself. And you'll find these things will happen quite frequently when you realize that you are in control in the dream. And I believe when you are able to take that control in the dream, that's when the Spirit notices you. And I can't say that I really did anything. I can't pinpoint anything that I did to deserve the visions that I received during my near-death experience. And if anybody's familiar with Neville Goddard's work, he talks about a 4-part event that takes place over a small span of time. And these 4 events were transpiring in me. Actually, 3 have already transpired, and the 4th one is in progress right now. And this is highlighted in my book as well. I'll go into more detail about this process. But I didn't understand what I was going through at the time. I didn't understand what I was seeing. And when I told my wife, she just thought I was crazy. She couldn't understand what I was dealing with. And I really couldn't understand it either at the time. But later on, when I was searching more intently, I came across Neville Goddard's work here. And I had put Neville Goddard off in the past. I vaguely remember hearing Neville Goddard's speeches when I was, probably about 7, 8. I was at a friend's house where we would sit there and play Nintendo. And her mother would smoke cigarettes and listen to Neville Goddard in the background. So something kind of rang here recently when I heard his voice again, a familiar voice that I had remembered from somewhere. I had a hard time placing it, but did realize where it came from, and that I had been exposed to Neville Goddard before, but I never paid attention to what. That was just to me, noise in the background as I played Legend of Zelda. So here recently I started picking up Neville Goddard's books and watching, Brian Scott's channel. It's an excellent channel for some Neville Goddard's work. He's got a lot of it on there, and some great discussions around his work. Helped me to see what Neville was saying was exactly what I had experienced. And the three wise men, the baby, the death, the resurrection, everything had a very powerful dream, emotion, vibration, and experience associated with it. And it literally ripped my life apart. When you tell your wife that you see a small child walking down the hallway that's not ours, and there's nobody else in the house, I was the only one there, she just thinks, oh, well, he's seeing ghosts, he's crazy. And this wasn't the case at all. When I heard the woman's voice, a very soft, gentle voice, call my name, and there was nobody around, I did not know that was considered the voice of God at the time. I just thought I was losing my mind. I'm standing in the grocery store, and I hear this voice, like this person right beside me, and I turn around, there's nobody beside me, there's nobody around me. I'm looking to see if there's anybody that's looking at me, maybe calling my name. There's nobody there. That's the exact same voice that I had heard just probably a few years before that, when I was really sick. I heard this voice too, and it was the same voice calling my name. And here recently in a Brian Scott episode, I picked up a little gem from the rabbi that he was interviewing, where he states that the voice of God was a feminine voice. So I went and looked it up, and sure enough, it was. That's exactly right. That's what the Hebrews had stated in the ancient Hebrew text. So it just, now I feel more confirmation that what I was going through was the experience of the Holy Spirit. And it makes so much sense to me now, after reading Neville's work and finding these little gems like what the rabbi had mentioned. It's making so much more sense for me now, where at the time there was so much happening. I was dealing with cancer that had moved throughout all my body, and I was resisting surgery and any kind of treatment, and just felt that my situation with where I was at the time had deteriorated, meaning that my wife had joined, this Bible study. She was a Christian too, but when I told her, that these things like I'm having these visions, or I'm seeing these different things, she just didn't understand it. And it caused a lot of separation and isolation and blame. And really, she just did not want me there anymore. To her, I was like the devil, because I was saying things that were blasphemous. So her Bible study supported her. Her group encouraged her to do different things that would dissolve the marriage eventually. And sure enough, just within the last few months, after 5 years of being separated, we are now divorced. And I noticed this process caused so much turmoil that it feels a lot like what Christ had went through when he had experienced these things as Jesus, as the Nazarene. And that story of persecution from those that know you really rings true in me, and I feel that's another part of Scripture that's been fulfilled with the torment that I had gone through with my family, and being separated from my wife and 3 small children. They were pretty young at that time, so I don't think they really will be able to understand any of this until they're older and they can review this material. So that's the main focus of why I try to put this material out here, and to have these discussions, and to try to go into a deeper understanding of what the Sabbath really is. I mean, if we look at the Bible, it says, this is the sealing of God's people. This is a very important thing and yet we don't really understand what it means. And the Sabbath was placed in the Decalogue as the seal of the living God, pointing out the lawgiver and making known his right to rule. And that is our inheritance, because we each have that within us, as the Christ is within all of us. And in time, that will explode, like Neville described. It will explode within you. And if you haven't had this experience yet, it's probably because of the lack of belief in the Sabbath. As we can see, the Sabbath, even mentioned in Revelation, is talking about sealing God's people, that no harm comes upon them. And this, to be different than everybody else, it doesn't mean to go on a seventh day or to go into the Sabbath, on a certain day to be seen by other people. This is really an internal process of learning about sleep, about entering into that spirit world of your subconscious mind. This is very important because within the dream, you're practicing. You're practicing on how to change the things that you don't like. So if you're in a dream and it's a nightmare and people are shooting and killing each other, it's a test. Every dream is a test to test your moral character. This is why it says, keep the Sabbath holy. Because when you're in the dream state, a lot of crazy things can happen. You can imagine orgies or murder or stealing, robbing. And you're in these situations, like you're the bank robber. What do you do? Are you going to shoot this person? So there's different scenarios that are being worked out in your dream, and we don't think about these things. We just dream. We have a dream. We say, oh, I got robbed. I was shot last night in my dream. It was a horrible dream. But really it was an opportunity for you to make a decision in which outcome you would choose. And the Spirit's monitoring those. So if you decide to rape a woman in your dream, or, violate some, sacred thing, you're only sinning against yourself, so to speak. In the process, you don't understand. But once you do understand, and you can stop time, stop the robbery from happening, say, I want these two to embrace in a hug, instead of him shoot her, or whatever it is in the dream or the nightmare, you take control. Everything is animated because you're in control. You just don't realize you're in control, like I didn't. But once I realized I'm in control, and once you realize you're in control, you take control. Change the dream to the way that you want it by stopping time and then reanimating the time. This is critical, because if you don't know how to do this process, I'm being told, when we enter death and move towards that light at the end of the tunnel, we're faced by all our demons, so to speak, all those hateful wishes that you put on other people because they wronged you or did this or that. Creates a dark entity that kind of goes after that person and attacks them and does what you wanted it to do to them, however bad that is. And then it finishes, and when it's done, it returns to you to do the same thing so that you can experience it. And at the end of your life, all these dark entities return to you, maybe in the form of a lion trying to attack you, or something trying to chase you. And if you feel chased in that tunnel, you're not going to make it to the light. So a process, the Egyptians described this process, and of course it's described in the Law of One material as well, of a process where you have to stop time, deanimate those things that you created that were dark, and allow them to reintegrate into yourself with love. And if you can do that through this practicing of controlling your dreams, then you'll be able to enter the tunnel, your harvestable material, meaning that you can proceed to the next density of life. But until we learn those lessons, we'll stay at this density, which is a third density. We don't proceed to heaven when we die. We do proceed to our next life. That is a life in fourth density described as the Christ body. So at some point you'll need to have that vision of the baby being given to you. That's really important. And you'll know when you have it. You will know because the dream, you will never be able to forget it. And if you think you have, ask. Ask to remember any dreams you've had of a baby. And you'll be surprised. I've been able to recall a lot of dreams just by asking to have those dreams again. By consulting with my guides in my mind, asking, giving love and thanks for that they offer. It's a very subtle process discussing your thoughts within your head. But know, when you do discuss those thoughts like you're having a conversation with someone else within your head, that a lot of ideas can be interjected by the Spirit during that process. So always allow your mind to talk things out with yourself. You can refer to it as your higher self. And always try to focus on the best, the positive, the most beneficial for all, not just oneself. But try to think of that in a service to others method. There's service to self available in these lessons here and service to others. Both will utilize the Sabbath and sleep, their imagination, their emotions, and that ability to manifest their desires. So I always say, you can be anything you dream, or you can make your dreams come true, or whatever they say along those lines. It means it all starts within your dreams. Your creation of reality starts within the dream. Just like God, when he started dreaming and entering into the dream, he was entering into his visions that were attached to the emotions. And with the emotions, the recipe's starting to come together. So you can paint the picture, you can use your senses to draw out the emotion. And that's the magic of the Sabbath. And we have this every day. We have the opportunity to enter into that belief. That belief that you are the creator. And in the dream, you take full control of your creation. Meaning if you don't like something, you can stop it. You can destroy it. You can recreate it. And once you dabble with that power and that ability within the dream state, within that Sabbath time, that is when the Spirit will recognize you, will notice you, will see you, say you're trying to disrupt the dream state. And like in the movie Inception, when you do that, the dream tends to turn on you. And if you don't have control of it, it gets even more chaotic. So that's why it's critical to learn the process within the dream by practicing in the sandbox that we call our mind. And we can't really say this is rational, what is taking place. It's not scientific or something we can really describe, but an experience that we undergo and experience in the Holy Spirit. So the Holy Spirit's providing this experience. And we can interact with the Holy Spirit in our spirit realm, or in our dream time. We call this the time our third eye is open. And we see things within the dream. We have dreams. That's the eye that's visualizing those dreams. Not our regular eyes, but rather our third eye. So that's important. And understanding the meaning of what the Sabbath really is, what it really means to be sealed of God, and to have these visions that the prophets were given that show to man, doesn't matter what religion you're in, doesn't matter if you're a Buddhist or a Hindu, they all experience these same things. The rebirth of a baby following the death of the body and a resurrection type scene. This crucifixion and the birth of the baby take place very close together. The dying of the man, and then seeing the baby, and then that man taking that baby into his arms. Even in Native American traditions, this has been seen, documented, and a strong belief. And some of these native religions, like of Papua New Guinea, they're still keeping a process of what they call the Sabbath. These people have been untouched by civilization. I mean, we're just now starting to get in there and document these different Aboriginal tribes, and their beliefs are really fascinating. That they're back at the core belief of the basics. And I find that truly spectacular. That they're far more intelligent than man with all of this technology, because they understand the simple principle of manifesting their dreams and bringing into reality that which they want to experience by first imagining it, feeling it, sensing it, and then allowing it to unfold in that spirit state, that dream time, to see it, to work with it even more. See, is that really what you want to create? And whatever that is, if your desire is intense enough, you will create that. So you need a relationship. If you need a friend, if you need, that company, or if you need monetary things like money to pay bills or different stuff, all that can come to you very easily with this same process. Just imagining what it is you need, and then allowing the Spirit to fulfill that for you. And that's the key to the Sabbath. That's the key to understanding. You are resting from your creation. You're allowing the Spirit to manifest that, not your physical hands, but the Spirit. And doing this process, you're exercising your God power. You're showing to yourself who you really are by exercising these abilities. And that gives you the confirmation you need to really understand who you are. And that's what I'm coming to understand. As Neville says, I am Christ. Christ is within me. He's not out there. He's not anywhere but within me. And I woke him up. And in this next video, I'm going to describe the process that I used to rent the veil, as described in the New Testament. When Christ was resurrected, the veil was rent, and the Holy of Holies was revealed. And that was a very, very powerful, powerful vision that I had that changed my entire outlook on everything. Everything made sense after I had that vision. So in the next video, I'm gonna outline that process, and we're going to talk a little bit more about this process for manifesting using your sleep and the Sabbath. And hopefully what I've gone through here will help you to understand a little more about the Sabbath and how critical the process is, how easy it is. And I hope that you will take this process and not just take my word for it, but actually try the process. See if it works for you like it did for me. And it may take a little practice. It may not happen the first time you try it, but keep trying it. Give it a good go. And let me know what happens for you. Post it down in the comments if you have a dream or something. I'd love to hear from you and your experiences trying these different things. Because it's only by trying and experiencing it helps to get rid of the doubt. And then your belief will grow stronger as you have more evidence showing you that you are fully capable of doing this. And that we are all fully capable of doing this. All right, so in closing on this, we'll do some more episodes on this in the future, but I want to just let this kind of sink in a little bit and give you a little bit of time to go research this. Go take a look for yourself and try to grasp this meaning. I would definitely recommend looking at some of Neville Goddard's lectures on the Sabbath. And I would definitely recommend trying to read a little bit of the Bible, just different spots. Maybe use a concordance and pull out Sabbath, a sealing of God's people, and just read through those texts. There are Sabbath texts all throughout the Bible that talk about the Sabbath, the belief associated with the Sabbath. Because of their disbelief, they would not enter the Sabbath. This was the problem the Israelites had. And they spent the 40 years in the desert. They could not enter the Sabbath. They couldn't enter the belief in keeping the Sabbath. Or really, they couldn't enter the belief that they themselves are God too.